are recorded. Yeah. The My History Angel Forum is implementing a special project, and will hold 2022 Asia Youth Forum on Women's Rights and Peace, with the students' participation from 5 countries. The Republic of Korea, Japan, and the Philippines, Malaysia, and Bangladesh. Okay. And the main conference will be held on October 27, okay, October 27 this year in Seoul, as part of the 2022 International Conference on Women's Rights and Peace, with the sponsorship of the Research Institute on Japanese military sexual slavery, affiliated with the Women's Human Rights Institute of Korea. Okay. So the Asia Youth Forum aims to provide a venue for joint discussions about women's rights and the current status of gender-based violence in Asian countries, viewed by Asian youth, and at the same time to form an international network for young people. So the students participants from 5 countries are doing research and preparing for their final version for their presentation in Seoul in October, under the guidance of their mentors. Okay. So today, students representatives from Malaysia will make their preliminary presentations based on their research. We would appreciate your constructive comments and advice on their presentations. With your comments and feedback, they will complement and complete their research presentations as a final version. We would appreciate your cooperation. Okay. We have 2 students presenters today. They are from the University Malaysia Sabah, okay, UMS, and the mentor is Dr. Ayesha Abu Bakar here. Okay. First presenter is Ms. Noor Abiana Binti Reptip. Okay, she will present on the topic advocacy towards ending children marriage among indigenous communities in Sabah, Malaysia. And the second presenter, Mr. Alec Sin Tianok Sunga, he will present on the topic sexual and gender-based violence. Question: can this happen among boys and men? Okay, 2 presentations. Okay. And each will cover about 15 or 20 minutes. And today's moderator is Dr. Ayesha Abu Bakar, who serves as a mentor for the Malaysian students, representing University Malaysia Sabah UMS. Okay, Sabah is Ayesha is here. And just before starting our main presentation, I welcome our regular members after our long break. Okay, long break. So Dr. Sweet from Thailand. Okay, welcome. And my standing president, Migang Yang, she's not in Seoul, but she's visiting the Philippines. Okay, she attended from Philippines. Okay, welcome. And I see the Toshikazu Izumi from Japan. Okay, our regular member, welcome. And also from Japan, I saw the Kazuya Asakawa, okay, professor. Okay, welcome. And okay, our regular member, Professor Mikio Oishi, not from Malaysia, but from Bangladesh this time. Okay, welcome. And Razlan Zeni, Ambassador Zeni from Indonesia. And Madam Crystal McDonald from USA, welcome. And Konstantina, okay, from Greece. Again, thank you. Okay. And I saw the Dr. Manuel Vidal from Spain. Okay. And Professor Bernard Garganilla is here as another mentor for Philippines. Okay, so I saw the many students here. They from Malaysia, Bangladesh, and the Philippines, I think. Okay, and I expect some students from Japan and Korea. Okay, I already sent a notice to them. And today's moderator, the Ayesha, okay, Abu Bakr. Let me briefly one more time remind you about her. Dr. Ayesha is a research fellow at the Borneo Institute for Indigenous Studies at the University of Malaysia, Sabah, and a senior lecturer at the International Relations Program of the Faculty of Social Science and Humanities at the same university, okay? She teaches human rights, international humanitarian law, religion, ethnicity, and conflict at the undergraduate level and the master course on peace and development. Dr. Ayesha is a scholar, at the same time, practitioner in the field of peace and conflict studies in Southeast Asia. And she's known for her on the Mindanao and the Bangsamoro peace process, in which she has published a book entitled Peace Building and Sustainable Human Development, the Pursuit of the Bangsamoro Right to Self-Determination in 2019. And coincidentally, she's now visiting Manila, Philippines for the book, the fair, right? The book exhibition, right? With her book, okay, her new, published book. And Dr. Ayesha is a member of the ASEAN Women Peace Registry, representing Malaysia, as a part of a pool of experts in peace process and peace building. Okay, Dr. Ayesha, thank you for joining us today with your students. Okay, Dr. Ayesha, would you please proceed with this forum? Podium is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Sung Ho Kang. Assalamualaikum, selamat malam, good evening, or good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I'm joining you here from Manila. At the same time, our students who are joining in this conference are based in Kota Kinabalu. They are our students at the International Relations Program at University Malaysia Sabah. So we have two groups, and I will just quickly allow them to introduce their group. So the two group leaders are Noor Abiana and Alec. So let me start with Alec. Please introduce yourself and your group mates.
Hello, am I audible? Am I loud and clear?
Yes. Can you please turn on your camera?
Oh yeah, sure, definitely.
All students, if excuse me, Ayesha, moderator Ayesha, if students they can join, we welcome them. Okay.
Okay.
Can you guys see me?
Go ahead.
Hello, madams and
Hello.
sirs. Oh yeah, hello. A very good morning, afternoon, evening, and night, whichever country you guys from and whatever timeline you guys are currently in. So my name is Alex Shantanok Sunga. I'm currently a student in University Malaysia Sabah. I'm also a Filipino from the Philippines. And today I'll be presenting about my topic about gender-based sexual violence. Can this happen to men and boys? And my group is Emery Yamagishi from Japan, as well as
Emery, can you please turn on your camera?
if she's
Can we
here.
ask all the students to please turn on your camera?
Okay.
Okay. Maybe just allow them to introduce themselves quickly, Alex. Your group mates.
Yeah, Emery, can you introduce
Go
yourself?
ahead, Emery.
I'm Emily Yamagish. I'm from Japan. I'm studying University Malaysia Sabah. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I also Karen Adeline Lewis from Sabah as well. That's one of my group members.
Karen.
Oh, hi. Okay, my name is Karen Dilinius. I'm from Sabah, studying international relations. Nice to meet you.
One of my group members, unfortunately, her area, the place that she currently resides on, her area has a electrical blackout, so I don't think she's able to join, but I hope she can join. So she's also her name is Farah Kairana. She's also one of my group mates, also residing in Sabah, Malaysia. So hopefully she can join on time. Hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Alec. And I'd like to ask Noor Abiana for the second group. Kindly introduce yourself and your topic, and then let your group mates also say something about themselves. Go ahead, Noor Abiana.
Assalamualaikum. Good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Noor Abiana binti Abdul Latif, and our group will be presenting about advocacy towards ending child marriage among the indigenous communities in Sabah, Malaysia. And I will let my members present it, introduce themselves. Kizzy, you can go first. And then.
Hello everyone, my name is Fizi Shabina Jailani and I'm currently studying in University of Malaysia, Sabah.
Thank you, Fizi.
Hello everyone, my name is Nurul Hazima and I'm a student of International Relations from University Malaysia, Sabah.
Okay, thank you, Nurul.
Hello everyone, my name is Sujita Billy and I'm also a student from University Malaysia, Sabah. Nice to meet you all.
Okay, thank you very much to all our students. So now we'd like to request Alec to do the first presentation. Are you ready, Alec?
One of my group members hasn't joined yet.
Okay, so let's have
yeah.
Noor Abiana. Is that all right with you? You go first.
I'm so sorry, but yeah, sorry for the inconvenience.
Yeah, we can go first, madam.
Okay, so just a reminder to all our guests also in this webinar, please feel free to write in the chat box any comments that you'd like to give or suggestions that you'd like to give to our students in their presentations. So please start now, Noor Abiana.
I will share my slide screen. Now, madam, can you see my screen?
Yes, very good.
Yes. Everything is okay, Abiana.
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. We will start our presentation on advocacy towards ending child marriage among the indigenous communities in Sabah, Malaysia. So first of all, this is our members of the group that just introduced ourselves just now. So first of all, what is child marriage in general? Okay, child marriage refers to any formal marriage or informal union between a child under 18 and an adult or another child. Child marriage is also a global issue. It is fueled by gender inequality, poverty, social norms, and insecurity, and has devastating consequences worldwide. It is a violation of children's human rights and a form of gender-based violence that robs children's childhood. Why child marriage is a form of sexual gender-based violence? Because child marriage is internationally recognized in law as a form of gender-based violence. Both are human rights violations. gender-based violence takes many forms and can occur throughout the life cycle, such as domestic abuse, rape, and harmful practice. Mostly the victims of child marriage are girls, where a child who involved in child marriage more likely to experience physical, sexual, and emotional abuse. Discrimination against women and deep-rooted gender inequality is at the core of violence against women and girls. What has been done by civil society in Malaysia? The girls not The Girls Not Bride have held its global meeting in Kuala Lumpur with the civil society organization committee to ending child marriage, where Malaysia has the unique opportunity to send a clear message where the law must be amended to set the minimum age for marriage to 18 years old for all legal frameworks, including civil, Muslim, and native customary marriage without exception. In this organization meeting, there were 46 organizations that have signed to end the practice of child marriage in Malaysia. For the joint statement, there is a statement of commitment to raise the age of marriage to 18 years old, which is in accordance with the Harapan Manifesto and the concluding observation made by the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, to Malaysia in March 2018. Second, law reform to set the minimum age for marriage at 18 years old women and men in all legal frameworks, including for civil, Muslim, and native customary law marriage, without exception, and that the full consent of both parties be obtained for any marriage. Third, collect age and sex disaggregated data on child marriage as collected by state authorities and make it publicly available to all citizens, including policymakers and CSOs. The last one is initiate national level campaigns with the aim to encourage social and cultural norms that do not tolerate child marriage in Malaysia. CSOs and UN agencies stand ready to support the government in developing and executing a nationwide campaign. Next this is the action plan of ending child marriage in Sabah in 2019, prepared by the Sabah Ministry of Law and Native Affairs with a plan to end child marriage in 10 years time starting 2020 to 2030. The main idea behind the action plan is that child marriage is a social problem and should be addressed by society at large. Also, Sabah Women's Action Resource Group, SAWO, also gave their worrying statement regarding this issue, where they're very concerned with the article in Free Malaysia Today stating child marriage, no issue here, say Sabah Minister. SAWO disagree with this statement and they think child marriage is very serious issues in Sabah. They urge the minister, who is an official of tremendous responsibilities, to further scrutinize his decision by first looking at all the surveys and studies done on child marriage. They clearly point out the negative impacts of child marriage. There are no positive that come out from marrying a child off. How is child marriage in Malaysia? In Malaysia, child marriage is still very much prevalent. Child marriage in Malaysia is legal because there are three legal systems that govern marriage in Malaysia. First is the civil law, the country primary school system, the Law Reform Marriage and Divorce Act 1976, which said the legal marriage in Malaysia is 18 with parental consent. However, a female below 18 but above 16 who want to be married must get permission from the chief minister of the state. The second is the Sharia law, which governs the Muslim. In the law enactment number 6 of 2002, Islamic Family Law Enactment 2002, stated that 18 for males and 16 for females, but younger than age below can still get married with permission that provided by the Sharia courts. Next is the native laws, the diverse set of custom that governs the country indigenous people. In Sabah and Sarawak, these customs have been codified into written laws that enforced by native courts. It stated that there's no minimum age specified. Okay. About this, according to Sarah Nordenstyle, Child Protection Team at UNICEF Malaysia in 2021, both boys and girls are affected by child marriage, but the impact on girls is greater. 90% of children married in 2018 were girls, and at least 1,500 registered child marriage occur every year in Malaysia, either formal or informal union. It is very concerning among the indigenous communities in Sabah because the law does not specify the minimum age of marriage. So, according to International Working Group for Indigenous Affairs in 2021 in Sabah, 2018 data show that a lot of child marriage take place in urban areas. In Kota Kinabalu, it was reported that 10 pregnant females between the age of 10 and 19 had chosen marriage compared to 64 who chose to remain single mothers or place their child for adoption. In Keningau, a community with a large indigenous population, 82 people chose marriage while 19 people did not. The last one is according to N. Lasimbang, the executive director of Pacos Trust in 2021, through her baseline study on marriage below 18 years old among indigenous people in 5 districts of Sabah, through her finding in 5 locations of study, which are Tenem, Nabawan, Kota Marudu, Pitas, and where is this? I will find the one. Okay, she said that in her study, marriage where both parties were underage account for 11.6%. 9.7% involved marriage to men more than 30 years old. 38% were married before the age of 60 years old, and underage marriage can happen as young as 12 years old. I will pass to the next presenter.
Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. I will presenting on why do indigenous communities practice child marriage basically in Sabah, Malaysia? Indeed, family poverty was an issue that affected the woman's decision to get married at a very young age. Family poverty is connected to child marriage, as will be described by the following sub-theme, in which child marriage occurs to reduce the financial burden. Next, Abian. So some of the women among indigenous communities in Sabah, Malaysia experience economic hardship during childhood and adolescence, which led them to want to reduce the burden on their families by getting married at a young age. For some participants, the parents had arranged a child marriage in order to give their daughter a better living environment, and the daughter had accepted the decision with conflicting feelings. Others simply felt pity given the family's financial difficulties and decided of their own volition to get married early. Next is religious and cultural norms as a reasons on why indigenous communities practice child marriage. It seemed that religiosity, quality of being religious, was the underlying basis for people's perceptions of accepting child marriage, and under this theme, there are two sub-themes, which are marriage as a quick solution for unwanted pregnancy and community tolerance of child marriage. So marriage as a quick solution for an unwanted pregnancy. To cover up the unexpected and unwanted teenage pregnancy, marriage is often permitted by the parents regardless of the daughter's age. Further, society tends to facilitate such a marriage. And moreover, when parents find out their daughter is pregnant, they will most likely urge the couple to marry quickly so that the couple can hide the fact that they had premarital sex. This pressure from the parents is justified by religious values. Next, then community tolerance of child marriage without interference. It seems that the community's perception of child marriage was that something had happened, such as pregnancy outside of wedlock, and therefore marriage below the age of 18 could not be avoided. In such a case, child marriage was tolerated among the community members without interference, and it was surprising to see that none of them experienced any resistance to their marriage at a young age by the community members. Next. Other reasons are lack of education. It is learned that lack of education is one of the main drivers of child marriage among indigenous communities in Sabah, Malaysia. Education or the lack thereof perpetuates these problems, and children who are married off early often become underage. Parents with little resources and the heavy responsibility of caring for their family. Girls with no formal education are more likely to be victims of forced marriage at a young age than girls who are equipped with secondary and higher education. And lastly, the regional and geographical factors is the reason that child marriage occurs among the indigenous communities. Adolescent girls in rural areas are often disproportionately affected by child marriage, and child marriage is more common in rural areas in developing countries. Two main reasons for this are that rural areas are often underdeveloped with limited access to education and economic opportunities, and cultural norms and traditions are more prevalent. So Women Affairs Department Sabah Jehua found that there are communities that carry out marriage without taking any consideration of the girl's age, especially those under 18 years old in Ulu Sugut, Ranau, Sabah. I'll pass this presentation to the next presenter. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to continue the presentation with impact on the victim. So there are two impacts from early marriage, which is social and health consequence. Next, Sabina. For social consequence, first, negative effect on a girl's educational development. One of the most damaging consequences that young girls face when they marry early is that they lose their opportunity to gain an education. Some family and parents pull their daughters out of school because they believe that further education is unnecessary if their daughters are meant to marry and have a children. In this situation, child pregnancy appears to be an important reason for dropping out of school, especially for young girls in underprivileged household and rural areas. Second one is higher probability of divorce and separation. Since young girls marry before reaching maturity, they face difficulties in trying to maintain the relationship and in committing to the marriage. Girls dissolve or annul their marriage because of a large age gap between spouse, ill treatment and physical abuse by husband, and husband overexertion of authority. Divorce and separation can lead to larger problems as young mothers bear the responsibility for childbearing and child rearing without emotional or financial support from their family or from society. The third one is sexual exploitation of girls. Young girls are expected to enter into a sexual relationship with their spouse once they are married, which can be both physically and psychologically harmful. This practice can be considered as statutory rape because girls below 18 are below the age of consent, which is they cannot meaningfully consent to sex. It can also be deemed as forcible rape because generally adolescent girls are unable to object or refuse the sexual demands of their older husband who are in control of the family resource. And last but not least is low social status. Child marriage undermines the social status of young girls in the Asia Pacific region, where child marriage is prevalent in many societies. Women and girls are traditionally assigned a status that is lower than men and boys, not just in society and the community, but also within the household. Women are expected to assume to stay at home to carry out their responsibility within their household as caregivers, wives, and mothers instead of participating in the community actively. Next, Abena. Next, for the health consequence, there are three of them. The first one is health risk. Child marriage lead to an early sexual debut, which automatically prolongs the period of being exposed to risk associated with pregnancy and childbearing. The International Center for Research on Women has found that girls below 15 years of age are 5 times more likely to die during pregnancy and childbirth than women in their 20s. Girl age below 18 also have a higher chance of complication in pregnancy and delivery compared to women age 20 to 24. This is mainly because girls at such a young age have not reached physical maturity and their reproductive organs are not yet fully developed. The second one is high risk of contracting sexually transmitted disease or STDs. Girls who marry at a young age are more likely to be infected with STDs, particularly HIV and human papillomavirus, which is HPV. Studies by the World Health Organization and other agencies show that young girls have a higher risk of contracting STD through early marriage. And last but not least is psychology and psychiatric disorder. Married girls lose their childhood, which is they have no opportunity to play, develop friendship, build social skills, or gain an education. This disrupt their emotional and physical, psychological development, leaving them feeling isolated, rejected, and also depressed. That's all from me. I will pass to the next presenter. Thank you.
Okay, next is what should we or you do to reduce or at least to lessen the problem of child marriage in Sabah? First, first thing is educate children of their right. Children should not be busy to take care of, for the children to have right education, so they know what their right is. Second, give sexual education. Sexual education is not something shameful we discuss. We feel embarrassed to talk about sexual education because the adult is so narrow-minded. One of the factors is maybe we never discuss sexual education in the right perspective. So they always see the sexual matter from negative perspective. So they don't see the positive perspective of sexual education. And sexual education will help children to know.
Maybe we have connection problem with the presenter. Go
Yeah,
ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
Abiana, can you just continue?
I will continue Sujita part. Listen already. Okay, the last one is raise awareness among children and rural communities. Combating child marriage is no one-day job. It involves a change of mindsets, social norms, and tradition that have been passed on for generations, as well as addressing poverty on both regional and national levels. According to Winnie Yee, Sabah Women's Action Resource Group, they don't see it as a problem because it's so normalized. Many generations have been practicing the same thing. For them, it is just the way it is. Many of them do not have access to kindergartens or play schools. So when they go straight to the standard one, they don't even know how to hold a pencil, let alone count. These kids are left behind and struggle in school. This encourages many girls to drop out of school, after which they are pressured to be married off once they reach puberty. That's all from us. Thank you. And
Okay, thank you very much to
thank
Nur
you.
Abiana and her group mates. So this time we'd like to open the floor for comments or suggestions. Who would like to go first?
Can I have the
Okay,
floor, please?
Prof. Zam, go ahead.
Before that, can you please close
close.
stop the
Right.
sharing of the
Mhm.
screen?
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you to all and congratulations to all the students who have presented very well. I used to be lecturer there at UMS as well, and I know that they have good students there, so I'm very proud of these students. Just a couple of points that I wanted to ask, because I'm not clear, when you say indigenous, you know, who are the indigenous people of Sabah, you know, and then because I know that, you know, there are many indigenous groups over there, and then I think to just go, you know, present without identifying, you know, who are we talking about, you know, which particular groups, you know, because there are many different ethnic groups, and then also there are, you know, groups that belong to different religions. You know, you have the Muslim indigenous people, you have the Christian indigenous people. You know, I think it will make it clearer if we understand, you know, the demographic in Sabah. And then because as explained at the very beginning, you know, you have the three types or three separate laws. You know, one, you have the civil law for everybody, and then you have the Sharia or Islamic law, you know, for the Muslims, and then you have the native law for the indigenous people. But they are also Muslim indigenous people. So when you know, when we look at them, under which category of law, you know, that they belong to, you know, do they, if a case involves a Muslim indigenous person, does he or she falls under the, you know, the Sharia law or under the native law, you know, because the person is also native as well as indigenous, you know, so that makes it a bit, you know, confusing for me, you know, because I know that there are different types, you know. And then for the native law, who is it for, you know, for which group is it, you know, is being addressed? And then yeah, you know, so that, just to clear a bit, you know, for the demographic, you know, for the situation. And then at the same time, I think there's contradicting arguments. You know, I think one presenter said the problem is more prevalent in the urban area, and another person say in the rural area. And I don't know, you know, which is which. Is it more prevalent in the cities or in the rural areas? And then second one, you know, is in regards to the leaders. I mean, it was mentioned earlier on, you know, that, you know, there have been attempts to change the laws, but, you know, it has not been mentioned, you know, how far have we gone in pursuing, you know, the leaders, the political leaders, to change the laws. And obviously, you know, it's still not changed because it's still there. So my question is, why would the political leaders and the community leaders, why would they be hesitant in supporting a change to the laws? You know, or why would they reject any change to the laws? Did they have they given any reasons why they don't want, you know, to have the age limit, you know, for the Muslim community, for the girls, for example, from 16 to 18, or to have, you know, an age 18, you know, for the native community, you know? I mean, have they given any reasons as to why they are hesitating, you know, to do this? So just a couple of questions, you know, and again, you know, I think it's a very good topic to discuss, and congratulations to the students. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Now we'll have Mikio, Professor Mikio Uishi.
Okay. Congratulations for your good presentation, UMS team. I myself was there actually. Yeah, for almost 3 years before I moved from.
He replaced me when I left.
Yeah. I kicked him out before, but after almost 3 years time, so at the end of year 2019, I moved to Chittagong, Bangladesh. So I miss Kota Kinabalu with the very beautiful scenery, and also very nice and beautiful campus of UMS. I miss them very much. So anyway. Okay, my comment. Yeah, I think that Dam already mentioned many important points. So maybe I will point out maybe only a few parts. I think that maybe you may improve the coherence of your presentation. For example, in the beginning, I think in the early part, and you mentioned the efforts of the civil society, right? And to address, I think that this should come later, yeah, before you present what is the people present the situation of child marriage in Sabah, and also the factors working behind this child marriage. Okay. Then after that, there's a part of the effort to address this problem. And so I think the civil society activities should come later, I think. So otherwise, maybe content-wise, okay. And as a whole, I think it's quite informative. I understand the child marriage, which is very specific to Sabah. Actually about maybe avoiding, maybe just cover up the pregnancy, something is something rather maybe unique or not. Yeah, this is the one factor. So otherwise, basically, yeah, and maybe I feel maybe you may reduce the number of the maybe passages. I think because if you put a whole passages, then we tend to read the passages. Then while we are reading, then maybe we may miss the important point. You are talking verbally, so maybe you may simplify what is put as the in the PowerPoint. Yeah, and yeah, maybe this is the two things from me. Thank you.
I see reasons.
Thank you. Okay, now we'd like to listen to Ambassador Reslan Jenny for comments.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like also to congratulate the students for coming up with a good presentation and very interesting on a very interesting topic. Pak Zam has already very much talk about the question of indigenous people, but and I have a follow-up question. Why is Sabah being studied? Is it because indigenous people are big there compared to other states in Malaysia, and or is it because it is more prevalent in Sabah compared to other states in Malaysia? Do the students have a national picture of how prevalent is child marriage in other states as well? Because then it would give, I think, a more a clearer picture of what nationally is the situation. And maybe another question: is child marriage age limitation the same in every state in Malaysia, or is there a minimum age for marriage, in a national minimum age for marriage? Maybe that is my question. That are my question. Thank you very much.
Okay. Maybe with those points from Ambassador Reslan Jenny, I can ask the group to quickly answer because I think they can explain to you. Nur Abiana, Fizi, maybe you can explain like why is Sabah, an important case for child marriage. Okay, and what is the national picture when it comes to child marriage? Nur Abiana, would you like to answer that? the statistics on Malaysian child marriage? Boleh, Nur Abiana?
Why is Sabah being studied? Because in Sabah, the indigenous people of Sabah, there were many indigenous people. They live far from the town, and it was very hard for them to have the access from the, what we call it, facilities, education, and they don't have that much awareness about this undermarriage. And then what is regards to Sabah, what is the mission?
Sabah ranks, what is the number of Sabah when it comes to incidences of child marriage? Is Sabah number 1 or number 2?
Sabah is the number 2.
Okay. What is number 1? What is
Number 1
which
is
state?
from,
Which state is number 1?
If I'm not mistaken, it's in Kelantan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So maybe if I can quickly answer, and then the group can later improve, because when it's Kelantan is number 1, and Kelantan is well known as a Muslim, as an Islamic state. So that's why the argument for religion, as a detriment, as a reason for child marriages is strong for the Kelantan case. But for Sabah, it's stronger for the indigenous people population, because it is more prevalent among indigenous people. But that is not to say that there are no Muslims in Sabah that are also doing child marriage, but it is more on the indigenous people, because it is part of the native customary law, which the group explained. So maybe the group, Fizi, Nur Abiana, Sujita, they can, also emphasize that part, the national context, the federal state context. Yeah. Any more questions? I see here Rebecca writing a long comment, and also Dr. Christina. Okay, there is a question, Dr. Christina. Would you like to state this question? Dr. Christina Ogbugo.
Sung Ho has his hand raised.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello,
Wait.
everyone.
Okay, hi, Christina. Thank you for joining us. Yes.
Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah, I listened to the presentation of the girls and I was really impressed. They did a very good job, but I just want to add a few, give them a few ideas. I didn't actually hear anything about the research methods adopted. From what I could see and hear, they utilize more of secondary data. But I'm thinking they should actually clarify this. What kind of method did they use in gathering their data? For instance, did they reach out to these young girls that are involved in early child marriage? And how did they do that? What were their responses? Did they reach out to the various NGOs involved in curbing this problem? I think it would be nice to hear some of this in the body of the work. It should be inculcated, so that people will actually know how they arrived and derive this data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Christiana. Maybe Fizi can answer about this research methodology. While preparing this research, what is your research approach? Just to explain to them, and maybe the suggestion of Dr. Christiana, that in the future, how you can improve on collecting data. Fizi, would you like to answer that? Fizi,
Yeah. For the research methodology, we our group, mostly we are using the we're using the second method, which is we are more focusing on articles and other resource. I think that's all.
So desk review, basically desk review.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you also did an interview with an NGO, right? A discussion with an NGO.
Yeah, with Miss Winnie from Sawo.
Okay. Then maybe I think I think the girls still have time. So maybe it's possible to ask also the NGO if it's possible to interview like one case of a child marriage respondent, who has experienced child marriage. Maybe that is something that, the girls can also think about since they still have some time. Okay, and then Rebecca also has a long comment on the chat. Rebecca, would you like to explain to the girls your suggestions or your comments?
Congratulations to
Dr. Rebecca.
Congratulations to all the presenters, and very interesting topic. I see you guys have put in a lot of effort, and I just as I was listening to your presentations, a flood of things came to my mind. Not too long ago, I read an article here in Maryland, where I'm currently based, about a 13-year-old girl who was also forced to get married. When the parents were interviewed, they said it was for their cultural, religious approaches. So it seems clearly to me that there is a clash between religion. There's a different approach by religion and religious leaders, parents, and the laws that exist. According to your presentations, the laws also are clearly stating that marriages should be at certain levels and so forth. And how is this conflict going to be resolved so that girls are not subjected to the kinds of difficulties that you described in your presentation? I think that's something that you can try to look at, talk with some officials and see, make some general statements or specific statements for each of these entities. The government approach is clearly stated in the laws. The religious approach, how can you reconcile that, taking into consideration the well-being and health of these young girls who are forced into marriages? And again, congratulations on your presentations. I know it's a work in progress, and we look forward to seeing the final product. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Let's Professor Sung Ho Kang.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, all students, and Rebecca, your guidance as a mentor, okay, for your team. And I'd like to make some comments as a coordinator of this project. Okay, this project. I think because in the presence of all these very well-known these scholars and the leaders in their society, the students may have some burden or some kinds of, they will feel some nervous this presentation, but the main purpose of this gathering or this online the presentation, we call it mid-term report or the preliminary presentation. I already explained that at the beginning that on October 27th, the 5 countries, students, the representatives, they will gather here in Seoul, in Korea, and they will make their presentation during this, the international conference on women's rights and peace, okay, as a part of this program. And our intention of this gathering is to help them improve their, this preparations, right? And that's why I hope all senior members give some comments or some advice or some encouragement, okay? And I heard at the beginning in our meeting, in our, the online meeting with the 5 countries, particularly your case, Ayesha, the Malaysia, you'd like to present, you'd like to deliver your presentation like a documentary type, right? Documentary. Still, you think so? Then how do you present your display all these stories in your documentary? Is my somewhat technical question or something, and. Some friends mentioned in the chatting or some comments in your research, I think are kinds of like a case study would be very, very appealing. Like some person who are the victim or like as the child marriage. How about they do this? They are describing their life. Okay, their life would be very appealing. This is my idea, and I think this will be a wonderful opportunity for the students too. Okay, they will have a very good experience. Okay, with like interacting with all senior members here, right? That's why I hope they can improve their this research and their final presentation. Okay, in Seoul. And I saw some member, the Ambassador Kasit, welcome. Okay, from Thailand. Okay, thank you for joining us. Okay. Okay, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Sungho. Yes, just to quickly clarify first, the end product of this presentation will be in a video.
Right, video.
Not a video documentary, because technically the students can also improve. So at this point, I just requested them to do it first in PowerPoint so that they can have a better view of their thoughts, how in terms of content itself. Or is really going to be in a different manner. It will be in a video because that is where they can be more creative, like possibly an interview and all that. And then doing a video, and then I gave them a suggestion, 15 minutes maximum. Doing the video will also be more time efficient, when we present it to the conference. And then later on, there can be, of course, although only the group leader will be joining in the Seoul conference, and it will be on a hybrid platform. So the other group members can also join later on during the forum, during the question and answer. And then all the other members can also join in that. So that is the technical part.
Okay, and Ayesha, I'll send this recording. I'm now recording this the presentation. I will share it with you later. Okay.
Okay, so that the students can hear it again. Yeah, so definitely it will be on a different form, not this PowerPoint presentation. Yeah. Okay, Prof. Zam also has another comment.
Okay, thank you, Aisha. Thank you, the presenters. Just a couple of quick ones, I mean, because I still have not gotten answers to my question as to who are these indigenous people of Sabah. And I think it's going to be a bit difficult to answer that, given that there are quite a few groups. And then the problems that, you need to identify. But if you don't want to identify, who are the indigenous groups or who's the targeted group in this particular research, then just take away the term indigenous. Just focus on child marriages in Sabah, for example, and specifically say that this is only for Sabah, this is not for the whole country, and explain, that the nature of Sabah is a bit different from the other states because of the existence of the presence of many different groups of people, very and some groups are Christians, some Muslims, some natives. I mean, just explain it that way, but take away the term indigenous people, because if you put the term indigenous, you will need to explain what do you mean by this, and if you cannot explain, then it's problematic. So that's one suggestion. Second, just to also highlight, because I heard some also questions in regards to what about the other states, what are the response of the political leaders. I think it need to be specified as well that religion in Malaysia is the territory, or is the of the state. The state, for example, the head of the religion in each state is the sultan, or the the local leader. Except for federal territory, then it goes to the federal, then it's the national government, and then it goes to the agong. But for each state is this the sultan. Is because the sultan then appoint the the Sharia committee and office, and so it is in the jurisdiction of the state itself. So it is difficult because we have 14 states in Malaysia, and every states have different ways on looking at things. And interestingly, you mentioned that the state with the highest number of child marriages is Kelantan, and Kelantan has always been ruled by the Islamic Party, and the Islamic Party will continue to rule in Kelantan for many more years. Because it is a very conservative party, and religious sentiment is very strong in Kelantan, and then they will never want to change the law and raise the from 16 to 18, because it's also tied to politics. And then if they move it, and then they will be, people will say that they are going against, the Islamic rules and all those things, and they will use that argument to topple the state of Kelantan using, this is argument, so it's been very difficult to change, because of politics, that's also involved. And in Kelantan also, you have a big number of indigenous people, because indigenous people on the peninsula is different from Sabah, because indigenous people in peninsula are the orang asli, the original people, and they have their own customary laws as well, and it's also difficult to govern that. So each state has its own, specialty, So just to highlight that in Sabah, then, maybe the native customary leaders, are hesitant, to put the age limit in the native law, and then you need to ask them why. You need to maybe talk to some politicians, local political leaders in Sabah, or native leaders in Sabah, and ask them why is it difficult to put the age limit in the native law, because they, then you can get the answers from them, But again, each state is different. It has its own special rule in regards to, customs and religion. So you need to be able to identify, some of these things. So just, and again, take away the term indigenous and just focus this one in as something that is in Sabah. Another thing, last point, last point, because in Sabah, you also have a large group of stateless people, immigrants coming in from Philippines and from Indonesia. Are they in the statistics as well, or do you have statistics for them? Because they are not governed by any laws under the state of Sabah, and they have even less education as compared to the to the citizens and to the the native people. And are there cases of child marriage in this particular community, or are they included also in your study or not? So just to basically put more burden on your shoulders. I'm sorry, but I just need to ask these things. Sorry.
Good comments too.
Maybe just to quickly answer Prof. Zam. Yeah. Among the undocumented and stateless persons communities in Sabah, yes, child marriage happened, but statistically, it's difficult to prove. But in a sample size of 2,630 families that we've studied, there's roughly only we found only three cases of child marriages. Yeah. But then again, as I said, it's difficult actually to do these kinds of research because most people would not want really to tell you. But it's a very small number, and in terms of the official statistics, as an official answer, Malaysia does not have a statistics for anything about undocumented and stateless persons, especially with regards to their social and health issues. Yeah. Okay, but thank you so much for that comment, suggestion on indigenous people. I also added on the chat box, maybe that group can take note. It will be nice if you can actually come up with a map or a table with all the states of Malaysia, and then who is ranking number 1, number 2 in child marriages. And among the states, for the information of our friends, there is one state that quickly banned child marriage when this issue came into light just 4 years ago, when this issue was really a hot topic, the whole of Malaysia. The state of Johor, without waiting for the federal government to ban child marriage, the Sultan of Johor himself, declared the banning of child marriage in Johor. So that is an important insight actually for the group to take note, that it is possible that one state among all the states in Malaysia did ban child marriage. Any more suggestions from our friends?
I have a comment to make, if I may.
Hi, Christelle. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning. I think it was Nora Abiana who mentioned in a little note the topic of adoption. And that is my question. I also put it into the chat box. I would like to know when there is an adoption, who is the authority? Is it from the state? Is it a religious way how people act with it? I noticed here in the United States, there are more and more young people who, thanks to or due to DNA possibilities, have found out who or would like to find out who their biological parents are. So is there any way for an adopted child to find out at some point, 20, 30 years later, who the parents were? So that's my question, and I don't expect an answer right now. So, but just think about how are adoptions notarized and formalized. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christelle. Yeah. Rebecca also put a note again on the chat box about how the history of the various laws governing child marriage, has evolved. Yeah. And it's a very good suggestion, Rebecca, but I think, it's going to be a long, discussion, to be included. I think the students really just want to zero in, the status of child marriage and, and precisely to make an argument for this conference, how child marriage is a sexual and gender-based violence. So I also don't want them to, to cover too many things, because I think the idea of child marriage, maybe to some, it's not the connection of the situation being an SGBV case is not very clear. So that's why they are choosing this one and really focus on that argument. Yeah, but it's, of course, if this is a thesis, it will be very good to come up also with the historical discussion of the different laws that perpetrate child marriage in Malaysia. Yeah. Okay. Now we've spent a long time with this group, child marriage, and I think the students, will take back all these, take with them rather, all these comments and suggestions, which I also wrote. And maybe later Professor Sung Ho can also save this chat box because it's easier to monitor
Yes,
the
yes.
notes that I put in there. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much to this team, Nur Abiana, Fizi, Sujita, and Nur. Where are you? Because I cannot see the picture. Okay, where are you? Who else? Who is the last group, Nur Abiana?
Nurul Hazima, maybe.
Nurul Hasima. Okay, so now let's go to the next group. Okay, this is a very challenging group. It talks about SGBV, but among boys and men. But unfortunately, only Alec is the rose among the thorns, you know, in an opposite way. So Alec, please start now your presentation. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I'll share my screen then. Is my screen clear?
Yes.
Hold on. All right. I'll be presenting about my topic for today. I'll be presenting about sexual and gender-based violence, and can this happen among boys and men? So I've already introduced myself, so I'll pass the mic to Emery for an introduction as well as a short definition of what we're going to cover.
Okay, I want to explain what sexual violence is. According to Lane, sexual assault refers to sexual contact or behavior that occurs without explicit consent of victim. In other words, sexual violence is a behavior or touching without clear agreement with victim. Please next. The term sexual and gender-based violence is SGBV encompasses a wide range of harmful behaviors that are motivated by power dynamic between sexes. Next. There are a lot of types of sexual violence. For example, rape or assault, children's sexual assault, and incest, intimate partner sexual assault, unwanted sexual contact, touching, sexual harassment, sexual exploitation, such as showing one's genitals, also applies online. Recently, it included domestic violence, for example, no cooperation for sterilization and force of abolition. Those types of sexual violence are only the tip of iceberg. This means it's difficult to recognize sexual violence. Please next. And next speaker.
All right. Brief background on. Unfortunately, one of my group members isn't able to join because of her situation at the moment. So I'll be covering her part. So a brief background. So it was mentioned in Greek mythology as well as throughout the Roman Empire, a man who had been sexually violated was deemed to be lost his masculinity and was not regarded as a warrior or king prospect. So this is by a journal nurse practitioner, 2005. So people often think that males cannot be raped by women or vice versa, men with men. These beliefs are reinforced by the fact that women who are not attacked are considerably more likely than males who are victims to make a police report. When males do make reports, they are often termed as unimportant. Men are more likely to be raped by another man, although women can also pressure a man into intercourse or force them to enter. So this is a study by Black et al. 2011. So sexual violence was usually associated with hazing and targeted victims, included males who are homosexual, bisexual, or transgender, and a lower pay grade who are under the 30 years old mark, and in many cases had a history of childhood sexual abuse. So typical perpetrators were usually known to be victims in positions of authority and commonly comprised of a group of all males or a combination of males and females. During the incident, which happened during a hazing activity, it was common for the victim to be physically injured or beaten as well as sexually molested. Sexual violence was more frequently directed towards men who had sex with both men and women than men who had sex with just women, despite the fact that offenders were just both men and women. Men were more likely to rape and women to coax forced penetration. So this is another study by Matthews et al. Unfortunately, this I can't really go through my teammate's script, but hopefully she can explain more to this if she's able to join. So going to my part, the discussion. So this is one of the data that I've collected through my research. So according to reviews such as the Red Cross, there have been reports of male sexual violence in armed conflicts. Specifically, armed conflicts are the common places where sexual violence as HGBV can be found by males, men and boys, etc. So such as can be found in Central African Republic, Chechnya, Democratic Republic of Congo, Iraq, Sri Lanka, in the events of in events such as the war on terror and post-election violence in Iran and Kenya. So a survey done by Solange in 2021, just recently, in 1,666 families in Liberia, found that 32.6% of former fighters and 7.4% of civilians and 98 households from DRC, which is the Republic of Congo, showed that 23.6 also men have been sexually assaulted. Also mentioned that this these are former fighters as well as civilians. And also another study by Berbolet, one of the studies by 1 in 3 Congolese refugees have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. And a survey by NHK Close Up Gendai in 2021, 66.4 people do not identify as a victim of sexual violence. This is common reasons due to the fact they feel ashamed. According to RAIN, 1 in 53 boys under the age of 18 experienced sexual abuse or assault at the hands of an adult. And according to the America's Department of Justice in 2016, in the year of 1994 and 2010, 1 out of every 10 rape victims are male. So is SGBV a problem for girls and women only? Can this happen to boys and men? Yes, obviously. So according to a recent study, or just a recent study by Carpenter, how do I remove this? I can't see. Okay. So there are 3 types of ways a man can be sexually violated or can experience sexual violence. Firstly is rape and mutilation, which is the most common way for a male to experience this. So common sexual abuse against males and older boys involves rape and mutilation, likely to occur in captivity or during armed conflict, combined with other forms of torture. They're commonly used to feminize and humiliate captured males. So in recent armed conflicts, such as the Ukraine and Russian war, unfortunately, there's not much data. So hopefully there will be a report in certain things such as this one. So another one is civilian men forced to rape. So a dated research found that in wartime or detention, a man is often forced to sexually assault another person, often a family member. For example, fathers and sons were jailed together in Bosnia. This is during the Bosnia conflict, and forced to rape each other, or forced to rape their female relatives at the end of the day. So another one is secondary victimization, where a rape of women as psychological torture to men. So a psychological trauma to men of seeing their female relatives being sexually abused. This is a form of secondary torture. So what are the causes? So what are the causes? So one of it is to demonstrate of power. So basically to dominate and humiliate. Another one is terrorize and demoralize. Mind you, this is mostly most of the research has pointed out this is mostly very common in conflicted areas. So why do people experience this? So why do male and boys experience this? So a study by Slongon and Patel 2021, a very recent study as well, concluded there are 4 reasons or causes of male and boys sexual sexual gender-based violence. So one of it is socioeconomic poverty and impunity, such as a society that has collapsed or in a form of poverty. A man is most likely, due to their biological sexual urge, will drive him to sexually assault another, be it a woman or a man or a boy, regardless. So another reason is ethnic tensions. Sexual assault can be used by offenders to humiliate and destroy the victim's group's cohesion, identity, and culture. Genital mutilation and beatings of men or certain ethnic groups to render them impotent or unable to reproduce. If you dig in the internet hard enough, you'd probably see some videos of Russian soldiers mutilating Ukrainian soldiers, genitally mutilating and posting them on the internet. But it's really hard to come across, but there are chances that you can come across those type of videos, which is quite horrifying, but I don't really see them being reported at all. So another one is gender inequality, or a norm being masculine. So rape is used as a weapon of war to differentiate between a man and another, to assert dominance and aggression. So a model of masculinity, and to emasculate or to feminize a particular man, to homosexualize the victim. So another one is to military structure, is a military structure and strategy as a ritual military initiation or training to display masculinity. Combatants may be peer pressured to commit sexual violence, or even as a reward. It can be used as an interrogation and a form of punishment, often involve torture. So again, our Madam Dr. Aisha did mention that this is quite a out of the box topic. So one of the reasons why is because it faces a lot of challenges. So one of the challenges is the lack of evidence on male sexual violence. So most literature, as me and my group have shown that the incompatibility of masculinity, and because of the fact that it contradicts with the masculinity or male masculinity, that hinders them as it basically shows them as a vulnerable. It hinders them from reporting or seeking help or identifying their victimization. Due to the male perpetrator or female victim paradigm in sexual violence. So most of the time, it's about sexual violence, it mostly focuses on women. So many people make it hard to believe, to think men as victims as well. So an example is a study by Peel et al. In the year 2000. In Sri Lanka, prisoners were too ashamed to report sexual assaults because it contradicted the ideas of manhood. Again, this is very common in conflicted areas and also detainees or refugees. There's also this Western joke that if you're not manly enough in prisons, you might become someone else's wife in prison. So men who admit victimhood risks ostracization or being pushed away from their community. In some civilizations, sexual interaction between other men indicates homosexuality, causing gender identity difficulties, such as in countries like Brunei, where it is still technically illegal to be a homosexual. Or just since recently Singapore, they lifted the same-sex sexual activity. So before then, it technically is legal to do same-sex sexual activity in Singapore back then, but recently just been legalized. And also one of the challenges is the lack of institutional acknowledgement. There's a lack of institutional acknowledgement of sexual violence against males. There are few international organizations or NGOs focused on this issue. In a study by Del Zotto and Jones in the year 2002, examined 60 NGO reports on wartime sexual abuse, and only 2 featured men and boys. ICRC only recently, in 3rd February 2022, published a report on SGVB against men and boys and LGBTIQ members. And the title is, ironically, That Never Happened Here. So another one is a narrow focus on women. Sorry, not really trying to offend anyone. So female injustices and oppression can be seen throughout this century or history. The outright injustices many experience as on motivation of protecting and empowering women. That's why we have the feminist movement and women's rights. But also throughout the years, it has created a female victim and male perpetrator paradigm. male victims or survivors should not be ignored in this case, or should not be afraid to report themselves. This may sound like an argument against a feminist movement, but rather a reevaluation that understanding sexual violence, it is not only a female problem, but rather everyone's problem. It should be rather be a gender neutral problem, or should I say. So another one is the lack of recognition in domestic laws. International laws have a clear recognition of sexual violence as a gender neutral phenomenon. Great. However, this does not apply in certain countries. Domestic laws in some countries. According to ICRC, domestic laws should avoid narrow definitions that prevent certain people based on gender from being recognized as a victim or survivors of sexual violence. So it risks countercharges that criminalize unconsented sexual conduct. Sexual violence victims and survivors may find it difficult to achieve justice in homosexuality or adultery are prohibited. For example, in cases such as countries like India, it is currently still technically, rape is still technically specifically a woman experience rather than an experience by men. If I'm not mistaken, that's the section 375 of their penal code. And especially in the risk of counter charges, that's also Singapore back then before it was illegal. So if you were sexually harassed if you're sexually raped by a man, does that also be liable for risk of counter charges? Because it was technically illegal back then, or even in Brunei where homosexuality is illegal. So anyways, going to pass the mic to my other group member, which is Karen.
Okay, thank you, Alec. So I'm going to do the literature review. I found two articles based on similar about this topic. Okay, so the article about domestic violence against men, prevalence, implication, and consequence on 2019, it is stated that system gender inequality. The gender issue, and that is masculine nature, become a topic because it is boys and male, they are become silence, fears, and shame, and making those that domestic violence that they face is unreported. And also, based on the article 2, men often see as the aggressor, and the woman is always known as a victim to domestic violence. This fact made society didn't know that women can be perpetrate violence, which is women can do violence too. For instance, the feminist theories that bring up the fact about men abuse women to maintain power and control them just because women seen as a weak and need to be protected from those kind of men. This theory making these men or boys think that they need to put self-worth first, and that is why we rarely heard men's abuse. Okay, for the second article we'll take a look at research based on tall priests of men, masculinities, and gender-based violence. The broadening scope of recent research is pointing out about men as a victim. He also said that this topic is rarely mentioned because it showed that the incompatibility of masculinity and victimhood discourage men from reporting, seeking service, or even recognizing their victimization. It is a whole happen because of their status as a man. Last but not least, the social response to men's victimization causes barriers. These barriers making those men or boys receive different kind of attentions or network support from women as a victim. For example, a man who is become a domestic violence will seen as a weak person, and that is why these cases is remain unreported. So that is for me. I will give it to Emery.
Thank you, Kellen. So I want to explain how can we prevent violence against men. The first thing is to primary prevention that is forcing on before the violence happen. Firstly, is giving education to them about these matters, such as community outreach, mobilization, mass media campaigns, or any programs that is related. Secondly, is spread awareness among the public about the matter. This way, we can change public perspective about not only women can be a victim, but men too. The last one is offering counseling services that do to focus on limiting the characteristics that favor violence behavior, such as via urban playing initiatives to improve living standards, offering leisure activities for violence adolescents. Please next, and give a speaker for Alec.
So my conclusion, I know my topic is very, how do I say, it's very general, though it has its own interest. So based on the available research or my team has done and examples, it is clear that men and boys can be victims of sexual and gender-based violence. However, most researchers have labeled this phenomenon as a silent, hidden, or tip of the iceberg crisis, implying that more work is needed to fully comprehend it because of the lack of data and other obstacles previously mentioned. As well as the fact that how does this relate to women's rights? At the end of the day, as you can see from one of the how men can be sexually violated or SGB, at the end of the day, it goes back to women as well, because they can be used as obstacle to torture other men as well. So anyways, that's all for my group. I hope I didn't take too much of your time. These are the references, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much for this group. Okay. Is it correct that mates, Emery and Karen, Adeline are actually in this okay. And who else? Or other group mate is also second year or third year, final year, Alec?
Emery and
Hello, Alec.
Emery and Karen are currently in their second year, and Farah Kairana is in her final year with me for this current semester. Yeah.
Okay. As compared to the other group, I think the other group earlier with Nur Abiana, they are all in their final year. Yeah. So just for our audience to know that Emily and Karen are actually very courageous to take on, this group work. So they are forced to be part of this project. Okay. Now our first commentator is Professor Mikio Oishi. Please, the screen is yours, Professor Mikio.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the team for your very informative presentation. So I have learned a lot about this topic. This topic is rather maybe not known, and so yeah, your presentation was very informative. So I will make maybe a few observations and maybe suggestions. And first of all, okay, so as far as I understand, I think the first Emily, I think, give some introductory comment and whatever. Then the Alex gives a certain maybe theoretical framework, right? And just to conduct a general discussion on the SGBV against male, a general discussion, and this is also very informative. Then after that, Karen, I think focus on domestic violence, and my impression is that Alex is more focusing on this type of violence, maybe in conflict, mostly, I think. He may have mentioned maybe different situation, but my impression is that mostly he was Alex was focusing on this violence during the wartime conflict situation. Then Karen focused on domestic violence, right? And that happened, maybe domestic means within the family. Yeah? Okay, then again, the Emily provide the measures to address this problem. That's fine, but still I think there might be more room to streamline the discussion and streamline means maybe there are certain maybe overlapping things and still maybe three of you may conduct the research, each of you individually, but maybe after that, I think still you need to consider to put together so that the coherence would be improved. And this is one point. And also, yeah, and Alex general discussion is very informative and how this type of violence take place, taking the example from the world. Then I naturally am curious what is the situation in Malaysia. As far as I know, maybe you didn't mention any example of Malaysia, the situation, yeah. Then with this knowledge of violence against male, then I naturally want to know about the Malaysian situation, yeah. So because you are representing Malaysia and how this type of violence appear. Maybe Malaysia maybe not flagged with the conflict, obvious conflict, then mostly this take place as a domestic violence, right? So so maybe it's good for you to have to give the situation of Malaysia, and then of course the effort that's been done so far, and then maybe recommendation in the yeah, in the end. Okay, so that's my comment. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, Professor Mikio. So just to emphasize to the group, yeah, you need to relook again at your presentation and to make sure that some of the discussions are not overlapping. You know, so the structure of the presentations has to be reviewed. And then a good point also from Prof. Zam and Prof. Mikio, how about in the Malaysian situation? While we do know that the more that it is difficult to find any data on Malaysia, but I think there are some literature that did mention that these things can happen in the detention centers among refugee communities. You know, so maybe if you can find a little bit more literature on that and not necessarily statistics, because I'm sure you will not have any statistics on this, you know, but at least mentioning, you know, some allusions, you know, to these cases in Malaysia, and maybe with the law. I think that is one discussion that you can also point out. How does Malaysian law look at this kind of cases? Okay, now let's all call on now Mr. Kazuya Asakawa.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. So I'm in the field of the peace education. So my mentor, Dr. Betty Liardon, always says war system, war culture are created by men. The patriarchy, the culture, patriarchy system. So that is deep rooted. So far, learning the gender issue is very sensitive because it is a daily matters and also historical matters too. So far that as a Japanese citizens, I reconsider that still that the reconciliation, the government and my friends also needs more efforts to make a reconciliation with Asian neighbors, whatever the violence against women during the World War II. So far, I would like to put two information from Japan. So the teenager pregnancy rate also the problem in Japan, and also the ethics that it is common to the Korea, the Confucius ethics. The first presenters mentioned Islamic values. In East Asia, we share the Confucius ethics. Probably Professor Sunfo will the expert of that. Then we need more modernized those religious, reconsider those values. Then that is my comment. Thank you very much. I will put chat box the information from Japan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Asakawa. Any more comments?
Okay, that is fine.
Okay, I'm sorry, there's something wrong with my internet connection. Okay, any more comments and suggestions? The group?
There's a question by Madam Rebecca.
Okay.
So what are the resources available for the rehabilitation of victims such violence and violation of human rights? See, that's a question to also ponder upon, because most of the resources made during this type of situation are mostly focused on women most of the time, and sometimes men survivor and victimhood don't really have the natural don't really have any type of organizations don't really offer this type of rehabilitation, as you mentioned, to men. As mentioned to a study by DeSoto and Jones, in a study by 60 NGOs, only two NGOs recognize men and boys as victims. So hopefully I can find more evidence on that. But yeah, thank you for the questions.
Maybe Alec, one possibility for your group, if you can already identify who are these three organizations in the world, and whether there are organizations in this region, in Asia or in Southeast Asia or in Malaysia, that try to help boys and men as victims of SGBV. Maybe that will be more concrete. So at least we also know for a fact that if we know of these incidences, then which organizations in Malaysia can we go to? Yeah. And then possibility of a case study in Malaysia, maybe an NGO, if we can try to locate an NGO that works with people in detention centers, where most likely reports of SGBV cases could happen. So maybe an interview with one or two NGO organizations that are particular to detention, the working in detention centers. So at least to make the whole discussion concrete, with some evidence. Thank you, Alvin, for that suggestion. Yeah, and then Constantina also has a good suggestion. Constantina, would you like to talk about it?
Hi to everybody. Thanks a lot. The group, one and the second group, very vivid, very nice presentations, very informative. Something it was told about the feminist theory by a girl, excuse me, I don't remember the name, because I had the PowerPoint in front of me and I didn't see a girl, I think, told about that feminist theory contributed the conception that men are the violators and not women, something like that. Okay, I think that something there, it has to be more precise, because feminist theory, okay, today is more, it's very complicated, and there are stadium in 20th century of feminist theories, and perhaps it's the same that another said about patriarchy. I mean, feminist theory in the beginning, it tried to tell that the society is organized in this way, that men have the power. But this is a kind of description. I don't know how you join that. It's like you say that feminist theory make stereotypes. Okay, I am not sure. I have to think more about, but I think something you have to think about when you mention feminist theory, you have to think something more. That's what I want to say. To be more concrete, which feminist theory in what period of time, and what is the role? Does the feminist theory make these stereotypes that only men are the, perhaps, I don't know. I don't say that because we refer to a theory, we have to be more concrete about the contribution. And something else, perhaps I didn't remember well, but psychological violence was mentioned. I don't remember very well in Alec presentation. Did Alec, you mentioned psychological violence?
Yes, ma'am.
Too. Oh, you did, huh?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I lost it. Okay.
So it's about secondary victimhood, how a woman is used. Woman is used at the end. For example, a husband and wife, and the wife is used, and the perpetrator, or during an armed conflict, a soldier would rape the woman right in front of the soldier, right in front of the husband.
Yes,
as
that was a very
secondary victimhood.
Yes, I noticed that. It was a very interesting point. Really, I haven't really known that, as you put it. Very interesting, and about Bosnia and all of this you've told. But I mean, men in domestic violence very often make complaints about women that they exert psychological violence with verbal psychological violence. They complain about that, like Johnny Depp complained about his wife. I don't agree with John Depp. I have to admit that, but let's say that it aroused this subject. Many men have this complaint about psychological violence by their wives. That's what you said. It's very serious. It's very. But I mean that I hear too many men to complain about that their wives verbally ask violence. They do say so. Okay, thanks a lot.
If I may follow up on what Constantina mentioned, that abuse knows no gender. And I guess culturally, there's so many different ways that people demonstrate abuse, especially, well, besides gender, you can talk about adults and those who are minors. And like in the case in the US, for example, a lot of cases of teachers, for example, with their young male students. No? It's not an isolated case. It happened quite often. No? So there are situations where just because one has more power over the other or more mature, that they take advantage of the situation. Although you may say, of course, the female have the risk of getting pregnancy, but even then, as you mentioned, they can psychologically take control of a situation, and that's why later on they were saying these are young, innocent boys, but eventually they fall in love with their teacher, and then when they mature enough, they want to marry their teacher. So, there's a gray area of what abuse is, where abuse is constituted. No? In the case of seduction, for example, of course, males will not report about being seduced, especially if they give in to being seduced. But these are also an issue of power. If you remember, there's a movie that came out, I think Disclosure, if you remember, Demi Moore was the boss. And Michael Douglas is the employee. So he was saying, I'm the employee. So she has power over me. So I guess these are the things that we, in the gender discussion, we'll have to factor in that different cultures have different attitudes. But the bottom line is there's abuse that happened. There's the abuser, whether it is the male or the female, and there is the one, the innocent or the victim. In this case, the male, of course, as shared by the presentation, I appreciate that. No? I'm sure it's hard to ever report it. No? Young boys will not report if they have been seduced by mature women. And yeah, so these are not talked about. But I guess in the discussion of gender, again, we should be aware. We should, open that discussion so that more people will also come out, and people will become more careful, because it's ongoing, but it's as if society is denying it. Especially because it's male. They say they have nothing to lose. They won't get pregnant. But again, they lose their innocence. They're subject to verbal abuse, like Johnny Depp, and subject to emotional blackmail. I think this is what has happened to some young boys, that they fall in love, or they think they're in love, but they've fallen into an emotional blackmail, and it's really not them who's the source of power. They're simply giving in. So I guess this is a good discussion, but more research needs to be done, and more data to support that, so that yeah, it can be openly addressed, and maybe in a way prevented. As I've said, regardless of whether we're talking Asia, Europe, America. No, of course, in certain religion, that's another issue. No? Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Raymond. Okay, Prof. Zam, you have some suggestions? I think it will be good, Prof. Zam.
Sorry, okay. Sorry, I forgot to switch on my microphone.
Okay,
That's
go
now.
ahead.
I say I'm sorry. I don't have very much. I mean suggestions. Except that because I mean it's a good general discussion to bring up the issues. But I wrote in the chat box. What about Malaysia? Because I think this group is representing Malaysia. I want to see data about Malaysia and the Malaysian focus. If possible. Unfortunately, I know that this is very, very difficult, because I also know that you probably will not find much data at all in regards to cases of sexual violence against men, unless you go to the police department and you go to look at the police records, and you see, and if you can find cases of sexual violence against men and boys, and I think you will find it very difficult as well. Simply because, as you also are well aware of, people don't report these things. Okay, there have been cases where some religious leaders have abused young boys, but then we only hear how the perpetrators will be brought to court and punished and all these things. But then the story stops there, and you don't know what happened to the victims, whether they have been rehabilitated or they have been counseled and all those things. You never hear these things, and you never see any report on these things. So that's why I say it's a good case to look at, but then unfortunately finding data in Malaysia is very, very difficult. The second thing is that the law itself in Malaysia prevents data from being recorded, basically because as I mentioned in the chat earlier, sodomy, homosexuality is still an illegal act in Malaysia. If you are found to do these things, if you are a homosexual, if you do sodomy, you can be charged in court. you can be charged in court. Both, the perpetrator and then and the victims. And then even if it's consensual, if you do it, you are charged in court. So that's why it's difficult to get data on these things. There also have been cases where these have come out. And I think most people would know that our former prime minister, one former prime minister, was charged in court for the act of sodomy, some years back. And not only one case, I can remember, at least 3 cases, that have been brought against him, and then I don't know whether he actually did this or not. And actually, I don't know what happened, but then every time the cases come out, him and his supporters would say that this is a political strategy to get him down. But then it didn't happen only one time, it happened a few times. And then, the victims, have come out and they confess in court that this happened, to them and all these things. And what did the legal system and the public do? They then went against the victim. They say you are lying, you are doing these things, as a political ploy and all these things. I know that a couple of these victims even went, to the masjid, to the mosque, to swear that, look, I'm not telling a lie. This guy actually have sodomized me, and then that degraded me, and he actually raped me, and I want to to go to the court because of this. And then he would be smashed by the legal system, by the lawyers, and then that's it. Even if he actually swear on the Quran that this happened. So you see what happened to the victims. When these things happen to the victims, and people simply set this aside as a lie, how many more would come out and report this kind of thing. So in Malaysia it's difficult, because the law is such that this kind of activities are considered illegal. Victims will not come out. Victims will definitely be accused of telling lies. And if you are actually a homosexual, this is not a good country for you to be in. Even a man dressing as a woman in public, that is also illegal under Malaysian law. And we have had cases where people have migrated to other countries, because they want to live a life as, a transgender, for example. Because if you are a transgender in Malaysia, you are a man dressing up as a woman, that's considered illegal. So there is no place for you here. So they would migrate to other countries. So that's why this kind of topic is interesting, but it's quite difficult to do. So just to highlight some of these points, I don't know whether this has helped or not, but then if this is going to be a Malaysian case study, you need to get data about Malaysia so that it can be a Malaysian focus. That's all. Thank you.
Perhaps before we confuse further our students, I think it's good to remind ourselves that the title of this presentation or this group work is actually what is it, the title again, Alex?
Sexual gender-based violence. Can this happen to men and boys?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a really an introductory title to the to the length or to the complexity of the social issue. So it is already telling you the limitation that while there is an attempt by the group to discuss the issue, but it's really on a very introductory level, but then it's good that there are good suggestions, that perhaps to make it a more Malaysian focus, if there can be like an example, if you can get some news reports, of all these cases that Prof. Zam mentioned, because the news reports are there actually. You can just Google online and you can, although they have limited data, but at least the data is there. And then you can also bring up the arguments about the law, the laws in sodomy law in Malaysia, and some cases that you can highlight. And maybe, as I mentioned earlier, interview at least one NGO that is involved about this issue. And I think that is more than enough to to shape the discussion. But again, I think you need to be clear on focusing on the physical violence, on the physical act, and then mention about the psychological impact, but not really be lost, you know, in going into the verbal abuse or psychological impact, because you will not be prepared, you know, to entertain more questions about it or debates. So just focus on sexual gender-based violence, on the act itself, and how the boys and the men have more difficulty, as you already mentioned quite clearly. Why is it so difficult to do this research? Precisely because of less incentive for reporting. Okay, I'd like now to give the screen to Professor Mikio. I think you have additional comments.
Yes, I forgot to point the last one actually.
Yes, go ahead.
So anyway, as far as I know, the basic concept of patriarchy, right? Patriarchy, the domination by men, right?
Okay.
So patriarchy. So maybe you may clarify how your topic. So this is the SGBD against the male can be the part of patriarchy. How this topic, exploring this topic, clarify this concept and patriarchy. Maybe you may clarify more. I think how this topic can help to clarify this patriarchy situation.
Okay.
And also, and I think also Constantina also a kind of pick up sort of issue, and they also of course related to this one. And the conference is about women's rights and peace, and so maybe you may again explain how this topic, how addressing this topic can contribute to address this issue, and women's rights and peace. And I'd like you to connect and this type of violence and the main topic of the conference. I think I feel, Karen, you are exploring this aspect. I think I sense that. So maybe you and also other team member can do a bit more to this linkage and this type of violence and patriarchy, and also the main topic of the conference, human rights, women's human rights and peace. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks.
Well, yeah. Well, that is. I would like now to ask actually our our friends, you know, Mikio just gave us a challenge. How do we link this to women's rights and peace? Yeah, because personally, yeah, I think it's, you know, it's totally you know, the opposite. And I think that is why I also encourage this group to do this topic, because it's not only about women and peace, it's also about gender, you know. And when you talk about gender, really it's not only about women, but it's also about men and boys and girls. So I'm afraid, Professor Sungho, that if that's the top, we understand that that's the theme of the conference, but precisely we want to challenge ourselves that it's not only about the women, it's really about gender and peace. So I hope that is fine with you, that we are taking on this boys, the human rights for boys and men as well, as part of the gender discourse. Is that okay, Professor Sungho?
Yeah, exactly what the Professor Mikio always mentioned is what I was thinking about. But of course, the title is 2022 Asia Youth Forum on Women's Rights and Peace, like focusing on women's rights and peace. But gender-based, you know, violence could be, and maybe it will appeal to them. Okay, we only focus on, because it's mostly the women's group is organizing this you know, conference, but it's like on the other side, like this not well the known. I mean, not it's still obscure because of like a lack of like data or some shame or something. So it's like somewhat reminding them. It's a new agenda. I think it will be very interesting.
Okay. Okay, so we'll try to figure out, how to make that connection to the conference team. Any more suggestions from the group?
Time is over.
Okay. So if there are no more comments or suggestions, we'll
Madam,
end
there's
up.
a there's
Yes,
a
still Constantine.
May I say?
Constantine, yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay. Yes, I think that in a way, they can we can make women's rights more deep in our conception as women and women rights by erasing the subject of men's vulnerability and violence, that they accept violence. Because as Alex said, the pattern is the same, is the patriarchy that makes that when in a war, I exert violence to a soldier or to a man, I humiliate him, I feminize him. So the pattern is again in the pattern that women is the weak party, and men lose their masculinity. It's a kind of humiliate them. So it's a lot of things to understand by them, that the position of women, of woman, is humiliating almost by definition. In our system, like we say in capitalism, we can say in patriarchy, in a way, in our system, is by definition lower. So everybody who comes to the position of a woman is become lower or is humiliated. So women now can deepen their conception, and as society we can try to move to destabilize the system that humanize means humiliate or making lower somebody. Let's say I had this idea now about the connection with women's rights, is destabilize the place of women, and everybody we pose to a position of a woman, because about men, the heavy thing is to use him as a woman. This is very, the position of a woman is a black hole of lowerness and humanization. And this we have to make something. And it takes too many years to change. I don't know if I was clear. Was I?
I actually find that very interesting, and actually that's a very good point, how women's right can actually connect to this topic. Yes, how basically men use other men and you abuse them to basically feminize other men, so that and then the idea is that being feminized, being a feminine is basically looked down upon, or being a woman is looked down upon.
Weak, in a weaker position.
Yes.
Yeah.
So women's right can actually change this through, they can change
In the
this
same
fact.
way that men, as a men, in terms of gender dynamics, men being more demonstrating some femininity does not necessarily make them weak. That a male person should have some masculinity, in as much as they might also demonstrate some femininity in them. In the same manner that that attribute can also be present among women, that there must be some masculinity and femininity at the same time. That kind of trait. Yeah. Okay, maybe that's something that you can further research on about gender traits and behavior of both femininity and masculinity in a person. Okay, thank you so much for that, Constantina. I think the group, the students, understand that and they can continue to discuss that.
May
we
I
can
add something? May I add
Yes.
something?
Yes, Constantina, go ahead.
Yes, because I see the young persons to both of the teams have not only a scientific, as I understood it, approach, but also a kind of raising subjects, which is something like practicing activist conception, fetching subjects in arising subjects like marriage and violence and men and violence. So about this activism, let's say, women now and from the young generation can be more mature and protect, let's say, men in another way, because they are free now to understand their position, and education has to make that, to understand their position in a more deep and free way, because many steps are made by women. So be more protective and more understandable in societies about men, not wanting always the masculine type, macho type, but also deepening the understanding of men, and as I said, the understanding of genders, which is very important. And women now can be more generous and more understanding to the men's identity, more free. I think so. In some societies, of course, because in other societies, as it seems, problems are basics. Okay, but both things happens in our society: advance and degrade. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Constantina. Okay, so thank you again to all our students for their wonderful presentations. And I'm sure they have, they have learned so much from all your comments and suggestions. So we turn over now to Professor Sung Ho.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the students' contribution. Your research, okay, it's not complete. It's not, but still, the share with the all audience here, particular senior members, and thank you for also the all senior members joining this discussion. Gave a very good, comments and raising some questions. I hope they can improve. They can improve their this research and their preparations. Okay, and they can make or deliver a very, very wonderful presentation at the main conference in October, and we can see maybe in person, okay, in there. Our schedule, of this special this part of our season 3 of Thursday forum, okay, consecutively 4 weeks, originally 5 weeks, but September 29th, because of our office's situation, we changed the Korean team, the combined with Bangladesh next week, September 22nd, okay, next week, we have our plan, the presentation by the 2 countries, okay, by the Bangladesh, led by the Professor Miki Oishi as mentor, and also Korean team, the Sungmyeong Women's University, and Bangladesh, the ASEAN University for Women. And the topic is I remember the Bangladeshi, they chose the Taliban's impact on Afghan women, right? Is it right? Okay, it's very interesting. And the Korean team, they chose their topic, the past and the present of women's human rights in Korea, focusing on the the Japanese military comfort women and the Me Too movement, okay, modern, this contemporary, the issue, and the previous, like the gender-based violence during the wartime, okay? They will be very interesting. So I hope not only Korean, Bangladeshi students, but still the Malaysia, Philippines, and also the Japan, I would like to invite them. Also, our senior members, please join us again and give good comments to them too, okay? So hope to see you next week and take a good care. Yeah, okay, let me. Okay, take a picture. Yeah, sure. Take a picture. Okay,
Everybody,
okay, show your face if you are here.
camera,
Right. Camera, right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Hosna, who else? Okay, ready?
Ready.
Rest lang. 1, 2, 3,
2,
everybody
3,
smile.
everyone smile. Oh, I love, show love. Okay, okay, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Also, okay. Also, I'll share it with the not only the professor, the Dr. Ayesha, but the other mentors. If they need this video, I'll share it with you. Okay. Okay. Take a good care.
To all
And
those, to Bernard and Raymond and Mikang, if you're in Manila, please visit us at the Manila International Book Fair.
oh, right. Yeah, she said she's in the Aisha is in the Manila at the moment, and to
SMX in Mall of Asia.
book fair, right? Book fair, and okay. So
Okay, we will try to go.
Yeah, we'll see you.
I hope so. Okay. Okay.
Mikyo, sorry, I cannot attend next week, Miko. I'm traveling, Mikyo. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
It's unfortunate, but okay, no problem.
Bernard, we have seminar on Saturday 4 to 6. We have a seminar at the book fair.
Okay.
Yeah, the Malaysian University
Bye,
Press.
everybody.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you,
Yes,
and all mentors, please
Thank
encourage
you.
it. Okay.
Saturday 4
Thank
to
you for the
6.
suggestions and
Sure,
comments.
sure.